Good evening. It is March 28th at 7 p.m. I'd like to call the Public Safety and General Government Committee of the Common Council to order. With us, we have Councilmember Frere, we have Councilmember Goldstein, Councilmember Dunn, Councilmember Ayers, and Councilmember Sutton. Thank you so much. We have a quorum and myself. Do we have anybody online for public participation this evening?
No, we do not.
Great. So I will open and close public participation. We need to go ahead and accept the minutes of the February 22nd meeting. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Sutton. I appreciate it. Do we have any changes or corrections to the minutes? Seeing and hearing none, I will call for the vote. All of those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? Abstentions? Ms. Dunn abstains, and so does Ms. Ayers. Is that an abstention?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Ms. Dunn and Ms. Ayers abstain. Moving on to new business, moving right along. For the fire department, we have authorized the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all documents, agreements, instruments, and amendments necessary with the Everbridge for use of their Mass Notification Pro software for residents for 3 years. Cost for 1 year, is $31,053. Cost for years 2 and 3 is $25,697.78. GSA contract number noted, Everbridge noted, account number noted. Do I have a motion to move this, please? Thank you, Ms. Dunn. And we have Ms. DeLuca here to speak to this item. Would you like to take it from here?
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So for the past probably about 14, 15 years, we've used a company called OnSolve Code Red for our mass notification services. And while there is nothing wrong with the company and the software, last year they announced a price increase, and unless we were willing to lock it in for a 3-year period, we were facing increases every year. We do use the system pretty sparingly or judiciously for really focusing on emergencies. So when you look at the costs, especially in future years, last year, again, by the time they let us know about the renewal costs, it was almost too late to do anything. So it gave us almost a full year to look at some other vendors, look at the state system, really look at some of the options, and then make a decision for how to proceed. So the recommendation is to kind of piggyback off the state Everbridge contract, give it a 3-year period. We'll use it for emergency notifications using the E911 database, and then non-emergency notifications as well and updates. And then after 3 years, 2.5 years, we can again kind of reevaluate and make a decision if we want to go to the completely free service or continue as is. But really, again, the year one savings is about $6,000 because we will have some setup fees, training fees. But then after that, compared to Everbridge, it's almost a $12,000 savings a year, if not a little bit more. So just again, trying to be good stewards of our tax dollars. And again, looking at the use, it makes sense to really, again, go in this direction. And again, there's nothing wrong with the current system. It's just, again, looking at the cost, the use going forward. So that's it.
Makes sense. Thank you. I appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Frere.
You mentioned that they pretty much do the same thing. I mean, is there any comparison study that you did to see they do better than our previous vendor in this particular area, but they don't do as well in that particular area, but we average it out and everything's pretty much the same?
Pretty much it is the same. Everbridge offers some tools that OnSolve did not, and vice versa. So again, knowing the system and how the state uses it, talking to some of the other municipalities that use Everbridge, I think it really does make sense. we're not really giving up anything by making the switch. And the one benefit of Everbridge, because again, they are the state vendor, is we now will have access for emergency calls for that E911 database, which we did not have. So the 911 database goes to residential, and then it also does have a much more robust listing of cell numbers that we didn't have before.
So this actually sounds like it's a better deal than the other one.
Yes, and again, the challenge is, so again, one example is it doesn't allow for the dual language messages. So where you would have, press 1 to hear this message in Spanish, but residents can opt in to get messages directly in Spanish. So again, we are going to have to rebuild some of the opt-in database for, again, the non-emergencies. But again, honestly, seeing how the company has grown over the years and the use from the state, I think it is the right decision at this time.
Could you just explain that dual language thing, that they can opt into it, that they have to do something?
Sure. So we are going to, again, in all of our messages, residents can say, I want to hear my message in Spanish. We could program RN to say Haitian Creole, knowing that's another language, assuming we have somebody to do the recording. And then when they go to the website, enter in their cell phone numbers, again, for the non-emergency piece, they can opt in to say what language they want to receive their messages in. So when they pick up the phone, it'll automatically be the message in Spanish versus hearing a message of, again, English, and then to hear this message in Spanish, press 9 or whatever the number was. So it's different. It's not bad or better. It's just, again, a different way of doing their dual language notifications.
I'm just still a little puzzled, but Josh has got a question. Let him go. And I'm still not quite sure I understand the opting in part of it. But okay, maybe he'll bring something up along those lines.
Mr. Goldstein.
Great. And I appreciate it, but the thing that I just want to get straight is, by entering into the contract with this new vendor, we would have access to a much wider database of cell phone numbers, what have you, of Norwalk residents, purely because the state also contracts with the same company? Because
the state uses the system for statewide notifications, they have access to the E911 database. So for emergencies, we would use the state database for those life-saving emergency notifications. But the restrictions on those messages is very, so right now, if we were to do a message on the rain, we can launch something, just letting people know it's raining. With Everbridge, it really has to be a life safety issue. So it might be a Superstorm Sandy or a significant Isaias or Elsa level rain, or again, wind, whatever it may be. But it just can't be an everyday, it's hot outside, turn on your AC. We have to be much more strict about how we're using that E911 data that we didn't have to do with our Code Red. In theory, with Code Red, we could send a message every day letting people know what the weather is if we wanted to. With Everbridge, we would be using that E911 database really for life-saving messages, and then our local database would be for all the other notifications. If that makes sense. We still have access to a database, but it's not going to be as robust as that E911 database.
Yeah, and I guess my question is, if the state one day decided to go with not Everbridge, would we lose access to that database? I.e., the residents who we'd want to contact, who we'd be gaining their information in this service and wouldn't have access to the information that we have, when the residents who we do not have their access to their phone numbers now, who information we would be getting if we contract the service, but like what happens one day if the state just picks up and leaves? Like, do we still get to keep that list, or are we kind of high and dry?
So if the state were to go to another vendor, then that new vendor would also have access to the E911 database. So again, as the local municipality, we don't have the database. That's kept at that higher level. So if the state changes vendors, then whoever that new vendor would be would have access to the E911 database. And then again, we would, in theory, again, use the same vendor. I honestly do
Okay.
not see the state ever switching,
Okay.
if that helps.
I think this is a sensible move. So, I was just curious.
Mr. Frere.
I'm still puzzled. I apologize. So, we're going to send messages out, and we're going to have additional cell phone numbers that we're going to be sending messages out, emergency messages that, like the bridge that was so damaged in Baltimore. They sent a message out. If somebody has to opt into the with a Haitian Creole language, they would not get the emergency message. It would just be delivered in English because they had not opted into it yet.
Correct.
So
So the
how,
messages will go to everyone in English. And
Okay.
then again, if they wanted to receive the message in Spanish or Haitian Creole or whatever other language, they would have to then go in to opt in. And again, it's going to be a rebuilding that we've had, again, however many years with Code Red for people to add their cell phone data, but we didn't have any distinction for English and Spanish in our current system. Every message was delivered in English, and then if you want to hear the message in Spanish, press 3, 2, whatever. We're just not going to have that. It's going to be, the message will be delivered in English, but we will spend a lot of time educating residents about opting in. We have a very strong community partner network. All of our press releases, website, everything else, we will push that message of, to hear the messages in more than one or a different language. You'll have to, again, go to the City of Norwalk's website and opt in.
so today, if there was tonight, a message would go in, and let's say we're on the new system. The day we have a new system, there's an emergency message that has to go out, and that's only going to go out in English.
Correct, that's my understanding.
And then if some non-English speaking person gets that, how do they know that they've got to call back to be registered to get it in Haitian Creole, let's say?
Well, again, it's going to have to be part of our education. So again, I honestly see us probably the first 6 months or so doing a lot of education and outreach to have to build that and do a lot of, again, proactive messaging to encourage people to go onto the website or to go to the website and pick their language.
So maybe I'm just maybe I'm just overreacting on this thing. But when we started with the current vendor that we're leaving, did we have to go through the same thing that initially everything went out in English and then we had to build up the non-English speakers?
So we don't know in Code Red who's English speaking or not. So again, other than encouraging people to add their cell phones over time or emails or texts, we don't differentiate. So every message that goes out is kind of that tiered. It's in English, and then the dual recording, or again, kind of like a background recording, is done in Spanish. And then people
Okay, so then
would
somebody
say,
can. Okay, go ahead.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
somebody would have to press, again, whatever number, to hear that message in Spanish.
So so today, the message goes out in English, and then they say, if you don't understand English, press 1, and then they give it to you in Spanish or something like that. Is that the way
Yep,
it works?
so, correct, so typically, again, the mayor will say, this is Mayor Harry Rilling using the code red message. His wife, who does the Spanish recording, will then jump in to say in Spanish, to hear this message in Spanish, press 2.
Okay,
And then at
Okay.
that point, it diverges the English message or the Spanish message.
okay,
Early on, before we had that option with Code Red, because again, that hasn't always been the case with dual language, the mayor would record the message, and then Mrs. Rilling would say at the onset something to the effect of, wait until the end of the message to hear it in Spanish. So she just repeated the message in one long recording. And then again, the option came up to create those 2 messages with people having the option.
Okay.
Otherwise, it was, again, say on the line and the message will go in Spanish. We could do that with Everbridge, maybe the first 6 months or the first year, until we got more people to opt in other languages. We could still do that dual recording. So again,
Okay.
having
Yeah, I was-
English first and then Spanish.
I was gonna say, Michelle, if we're recording whatever the message is, couldn't we also add in whatever we needed to, or the instructions in how to access or opt into that in
Correct.
Spanish and Haitian Creole or whatever?
or we
Yep,
could
and
actually
again,
even,
oops, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
go ahead.
So I think that would be an option too, right? To sort of help educate.
Yep, and again, I think once we get access to the system and the different templates and can start playing around with the messages, we'll be able to actually kind of get that hands-on feel. So I think there's a number of options, just like there were before we had this, again, the dual language option with Code Red.
That sounds good. Any other questions or comments?
No, I was just concerned that we're gonna have a lot of people out there. We've got a high number of non-English speaking people, and if there's an emergency out there, it's kind of dangerous that we're giving them an English,
That would be
Language.
my concern too, but it sounds like we have some solutions on the table for that, so.
some alternatives. Okay,
Yeah, and again, my recommendation probably in the first 6 months or so, if not maybe longer, would just be record the message in English and say in the line to have it, to hear it in Spanish. With that understanding, we have to be a little bit briefer with the messages. But again, I think that's definitely doable. And then as people opt in, again, we can make the decision to just do a recording in English and then let the Spanish piece do a separate recording.
okay, sounds good.
Any other questions or comments? All right, then I
Nope.
will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed or abstentions? I think that was unanimous. Okay, great. Moving on, we
you.
are going to, thanks, Michelle. We're going to register of voters, discuss and vote on whether to approve additional early voting locations within the city of Norwalk. Can I have a motion to move this item forward, please? Thank you, Ms. Dunn. So we had a pretty extensive conversation about this last month. I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything. We have Mr. Wells here to answer any questions if anybody does. Although it appears we may have lost Mr. Wells. Ms. Ayers? Do you have a question?
I did have a question, but I see the sensitivity on the screen, so I will hold my question because of what's transpiring on the screen.
All right, we may be able to answer the question if you want to pose it, just because we did have a pretty lengthy discussion about it last month, but
It was just a generalization of how was the early voting going
Yeah.
thus far to know if we really needed to add the extra thing, but I know we might not be able to get that answer just right now.
Mr. Wells?
As I went a couple days ago and the team there did an excellent job. It was the most well-staffed polling place I have ever seen. And it was it was efficient, and it showed it's sort of like no excuse. It is no excuse absentee balloting essentially, but in person. So I just wanted to commend Stuart and all of the people from the Secretary of State's office and the poll workers who I saw a couple days ago. There is one more day of early voting on Saturday. And then the actual primary day is April 2nd. So just so the people know.
Was it well attended when you were there, Mr. Goldstein?
I was there. I got to see our Secretary of State vote in Norwalk, and there were, it's a trickle. I know that I think they reported statewide on the first day it was like 5,000 or so people voted. I mean, obviously, for this particular primary election, it's not exactly a huge shocker who's likely going to win the Democratic and Republican primary contests, but it is the first time in Connecticut's history that we have early voting, so we might as well go out and do it. So
Sure.
it was nice to be able to participate in that process.
That's great. Thank you for that update. Any other questions or comments?
Is Stuart okay?
He has moved a few times, so yes, I think he's alive. I think he's just fell asleep, maybe. Mr. Wells? Yeah, he's moving back and forth, so. Okay, any other questions or comments on the floor regarding this item? And then we'll check on Mr. Wells. Okay, seeing and hearing none, I will call for the vote. Now, just to clarify, this is to say that we are just sticking with the one current location, which is in City Hall. This is not approving more locations. That was the advisement that Mr. Wells gave us last month. So I just want to clarify that. So I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Great, and that's unanimous. So our next meeting is going to be April 25th if we have items. Yes, Ms. Ayers. Did you have something to say? No, okay.
No, slow to take my hand down. Sorry.
No worries at all. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't cutting anybody off. So our next meeting is supposed to be April 25th at 7 p.m. If we have agenda items, I'll keep everybody posted. Everybody have a great weekend and a happy Easter if you celebrate. And thank you so much. I would like to call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Dunn. All those in favor? Thank you so much. Everyone have a great night. Take care.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Weekend.